afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. If you do any form of gardening or even just like to look at gardens and flowers, our guests today have some tips and ideas for all of us. So as we close out the month of June, it's time for our latest edition of Seasonal Garden and Landscape Topics. Joining me as they do each month during the growing season are Leonard Perry and Ann Hazelrig from the University of Vermont. It's good to see you again.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Good to see you, Judy.
So Leonard, as usual, you've brought in some beautiful plants.
Well, I have. Let's start with this perennial in the pot, thanks to Sarah Salatino at Full Circle Gardens out in Essex Center. And this Geum, as it's called, scientific name Geum, often called Avens is a common name, often comes in yellows and golds, oranges, but occasionally there's some red ones like this Blazing Sunset one here. They get about 1.5 feet, 2 feet high, bloom for several weeks, early summer. I think it's a perennial that's not utilized enough. And a lot of them are very hardy, very tough. This one is a newer variety. It's listed for zone 5, which means the warmer parts of Vermont. I'm going to be putting it in my own trials this year in a little colder area to see if it actually survives. So if you have a colder area, want to try this one in particular, maybe a little more protected spot. But Geum or Avens are a great perennial.
Great color. And also a peony.
A peony, yeah. This peony is Sarah Bernhardt, and it's a double classic one. It's actually an heirloom, goes back to 1906. It's very popular. A lot of people have it. It's a very strong upright plant, and unlike a lot of peonies that flop or you have to stake, this one tends to stay more upright. And I actually brought a few pictures along with a couple of others just to show some types of peonies. There is the double, and the red charm is another double. Actually, the stamens in the middle are turned into petals, or petaloid as it's called, and that makes it appear double. But that's probably the real common peony. Then there are the single types, and of course they're in between, the semi-doubles. But Nippon Beauty is a typical single peony. And then there are crosses between the shrub peony and then the tree peonies, and those are either called intersectionals, or after the man that originally did this, Ito, is how he pronounced that name. And there's several, and this is one of my favorites, Bartzellas. And you get the colors of the tree peonies, but in the shrub form of the shrub peony. So there are a lot of different ones out there to look at.
Yeah, I know. Each is more beautiful than the next one. So people always ask about ants on peonies. What's that all about?
Well, ants they're basically attracted to the nectar. They don't, they aren't doing anything wrong to the plant. They're not opening the bud. Some people think you gotta have ants. They're not eating it. They're just attracted to the nectar, so don't worry about it. A lot of times you'll see ants on shrubs and other plants. They're actually then start looking for aphids because they're attracted to the honeydew secretion of those aphids. So, but usually with the peony, it's just the nectar of the flowers.
Well, Anne, being a plant pathologist, your work focuses on problems and the not so pretty pictures. What have you brought in for us today?
It's all in the eye of the beholder because I think these are beautiful. Today I've brought some insect issues because that's kind of what we've been seeing lately. And the first picture I brought is a really cool insect. It's called the dusky birch sawfly. Ooh. And sawflies are really neat because they look like caterpillars, but they're in a whole different insect order. And the way you tell the difference between these and caterpillars are you have to count the prolegs, which are the false legs on the abdomen.
So you have to pick it up and look at it.
Kind of, but you know what, they have a certain way of, they're gregarious feeders, so if you see a lot of them together, they also can rear up their hind end, like you saw in that birch sawfly picture. That's because
terrible.
They don't have little crochets or hooks on those prolegs, so they can easily, when disturbed, they raise up like that. But they're really voracious feeders.
That's
they
what it
can
looks
feed
like.
they get on the edge of the leaves and eat their way in and leave the veins. So that was on birch. There's another sawfly called the azalea sawfly that I had on my azaleas this year. They also are gregarious feeders, a lot of them all together feeding. They just basically defoliated my azaleas just as the leaves were coming out. So those, with the birch one, you can the tree can withstand that damage, but on the azalea, you kind of need to go out early in the spring and look for that, and then you could apply something like neem or horticultural oil to control that, or spinosad.
Now, would that kill the plant? The insects?
Well, I would think repeated defoliations might weaken it over time. So Leonard and I were just talking, I was saying, should I give them a little bit of fertilizer? And he said, yeah, that's probably not a bad idea. You know, if they've been partially defoliated, give them a little boost.
A lot of times those shrubs will have a secondary set of leaves.
Yeah.
And they'll put that out, so a little fertilizer will help
Yeah.
them come out and recover.
Right, right. And that third picture I had was a rose sawfly, another kind of sawfly. Looks like a little slug, but it feeds on the upper surface of the leaf and just doesn't feed on the veins, but just sort of strips that. And again, that one, usually you see the damage and you don't find the insect, but that one, if it was devastating, you could spray with spinosad or neem. The thing about sawflies and caterpillars is that caterpillars you can use dipel, which is an organic Bacillus thuringiensis spray, but since these are sawflies, that won't work.
Okay.
So you have to use something else.
Alrighty. Now, Leonard, you told me about some of the pests that you've experienced and trying to alleviate some problems.
Yeah, and we, in the previous shows, Ann has mentioned covering some of your plants and vegetables with insect screening. I know last year the potato leafhoppers really devastated mine, so I got some of that. And here is that screen. It's very thin. It's hard to see because it's so thin.
Like a
but
fabric.
yeah, it's like a fabric, a polyfabric. It lets light through, water through, but hopefully not the insects through. And I brought a picture of the little structure I made out of PVC pipe, very simple, over my bagged potatoes. I grow in grow bags. You can see right through it like you see there. And hopefully that's going to keep out these leafhoppers and other insects. But again, it's just a very simple thing you can do, and you can find this online a lot of places, and we'll give it a try this year.
Now, you brought another photo, too, of a perennial vine.
Yes, wisteria is a plant, a vine that I grew up with in the South. You don't see them too much up here, but this one, Blue Moon, is one that is hardy. This has come back for me year after year. I actually got the idea of seeing a couple around, and so that's one on a fence I have. The beautiful, if you're not familiar with that, the wonderful fragrance of those, and they bloom this time of year. In warmer climates, you see them just growing over arbors, actually in protected places. And around here in a commercial property, I saw one on an arbor. But Blue Moon wisteria, and here's one in a pot that I overwinter in protected place inside each year. Gets, you know, just around freezing, but you can see it just makes a wonderful, almost bonsai effect this time of year. So Blue Moon wisteria is a great vine to think about. And a lot of wisteria, again, aren't hardy, but that one is. There's another one, Aunt D, that's been hardy for me too.
Excellent. So what else have you brought in, Ann, to show us?
Let's see, what else did I bring? Oh, viburnum leaf beetle. That was a real problem a few years ago, and then it sort of dropped off the map a little bit, but now I've had a lot more calls about this insect. And the first slide I have is of the damage that it causes. So
Wow, that is a lot of damage.
Yeah, the problem with this insect is that both life stages, the larvae and the adults, both feed on the leaves. So you get sort of a double whammy. So the first thing that comes out and feeds are the larvae. They're little yellow insects, and they just skeletonize the leaves. Then they drop to the ground or crawl down the stem, pupate, and then they come back as adults. And they'll feed probably starting in the next week or so, and again start to strip the leaves. So this is one that is easiest to control in the larval form. So it's really good to scout your plants on a regular basis and catch this sort of infestation early. And you could use something like neem organically to control these, but they can just strip your viburnums. And several nurseries stopped carrying viburnums just because we had such a problem with this.
Really?
Yeah, but now maybe it's coming back. We're not sure why it dipped, but
I'm thinking maybe they ate up all the viburnums and they weren't doing any more food. But the thing I found is Cornell is a real good website that I use, and they're actually cultivar resistant, so you can find ones that they don't like that you can plant those.
Right.
So there is one of the
and then
cultural ways.
Exactly, and I have a slide. The next slide shows the twig. The next one after this shows a twig where all those little cuts in the bark are where they've laid their eggs. So in the fall, you can go through and look at your viburnum, see if you see any of those, clip those out and destroy them. So you might have less larvae next year.
So you really have to watch all season long what's going on.
You really do. You have to be on top of it.
I've got a friend that loves his viburnums. Every day after work, he goes out for an hour and hand picks.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he loves them that bad.
Kind of therapy.
Yeah.
So heading into July, are there any upcoming problems that gardeners should be watching for or issues to prevent?
Well, I think, we've had some dry spells this season, and sometimes we can be deceived because we'll have a downpour. Well, that doesn't last forever. Or you might have some sprinkles and you think, oh, it's been raining, but it really hasn't soaked in. So actually getting a rain gauge is a great thing to do for gardeners, so you can really see what's going on with the rain. And plants in general should get maybe an inch of rain a week. So if not, you know, and you're limited how much you can water, either water supply or just too many plants, there's some tips I brought along.
Okay.
Both first to dealing with water and drought is conserving water, and that can be by like using drip hoses, collecting water such as in rain barrels, and reusing water if you have like gray water, say you're doing dishes or water from inside.
A humidifier.
That you can, yeah, humidifier, just put that out on key parts of the lawn. And then as far as gardening practices, when you water deeply, less often. That makes the roots go deeper in the ground. The water goes in, doesn't come out as much, and keep it in with mulch. You know, just a couple inches of mulch on top will really help keep that soil from drying out. And adding compost. Can't add enough compost or organic matter, and that really helps hold the water.
And then conversely, if there's too much water, that can cause problems as well.
Right, right. Especially if you're overhead watering, that can cause a lot more fungal diseases. And that's one thing that gardeners should watch for in the next few weeks, or these tomato leaf spot diseases are probably going to start showing up on the lower leaves. So make sure your tomatoes are staked, you water from the bottom.
And watering time of day, it's
Well,
better to water in the morning so it dries off during
probably,
the day.
yeah. If you were overhead watering, it's better to water in the morning, like with a sprinkler, so the leaves dry off.
Okay.
But I'm
Yeah.
glad you mentioned overhead watering, because again, that is so wasteful. You can lose half or more of the water just to evaporation.
Oh, no
So
kidding.
from overhead, it's easier
drip-
in a big area, but still.
Drip hose is your best bet.
You
Yeah.
can lose a lot. So hand watering or drip hoses.
We should also mention too that if, you know, a good idea for planting flowers is wildflowers. So those are really popular. If you have a spot in your yard or your lawn, just throw some seeds out and you'll see them coming back again and again. And we have a couple of pictures that kind of demonstrate that, how someone
Yeah, one of
put
our
out.
viewers sent in a couple of pictures what they had done, some sweet williams, and just they've been coming back each year, which is great. I think a lot of times these, and this is one of our favorite flowers we grow in our own garden, but it could be any number of wildflowers. One of the things you have to remember, though, getting established a lot of times, the wildflowers don't compete real well with the weeds that may come in, so you may actually have to weed them and give them a little help getting set up. But a lot of times once they're set up, and a lot of times a lot of these sweet williams are, in particular, are biennials. They'll grow and bloom, but a lot of times they'll self-seed then, and so they'll come back each year, as this viewer has had good luck with.
Nice. We've touched on a few topics today. You have more information on your website and
I do,
upcoming
Judy.
garden
Yeah,
tours.
on a lot of these topics
Yeah.
and more. In fact, we have a couple of garden tours. So the July one to Gardens of Western New England was sold out. We have 2 cancellations, so 2 seats open. If anyone's interested, jump on it now.
Call now.
And,
The
call
sixth
now.
caller
Yeah.
will get the seat.
And, but we do have seats left on our September 17th tour to the Montreal Botanic Gardens. We've had such a response that we're actually on our 2nd bus, and it's half full
Nice.
already too. So if you're interested in that, you can find those on my website, the Perry's Perennial pages, and just right there, there's a link to the tours.
And too, Anne, if people have questions, they can contact you.
Well, the Master Gardener Helpline is the best place to start. I usually deal mainly with commercial growers, but if the Master Gardener Helpline, they're right in my lab, and if they don't know what something is, I can help them out. So, but they're a great place to start.
Which is good. And
Yeah.
so what should people be thinking about heading into July? We've got about a minute left. A lot of heat probably, so watering would be key.
Yeah, and just also, you know, heat, you mentioned heat, it's a good point. Think about yourself too, hydrate sufficiently, you know, use that sunscreen, those kind of things.
Check for ticks.
Yeah, keep checking for those.
It's an ongoing.
All those
Yeah.
things, but yeah, just again, you know, the plants, once they're in and get established, you can back off on the water, but then if they're in pots, a lot of people growing in pots now, hanging baskets, once those get bigger, there's so many more roots in there, you may have to water more.
Right.
So just keep on top of that.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank
That's
you.
our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. I'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.